Hey, what's up, everyone out there? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Addicted Fishing Podcast. Today, we got Jordan in the studio, we got Josh in the studio, and we thought it would be a good time. We've kind of covered, a lot of things steelhead fishing this year, but we haven't really dove too much into the gear. So we thought it'd be fun to just talk about rods, talk about reels, some of our favorite ones, which ones we like to use for different setups. But before we get that going, we got to give a huge shout out to Nick Wax. Shout out to Nick Wax for sponsoring this podcast. If you guys don't know what Nick Wax is, it is a waterproofing, reviving liquid that you can put in your washer Gore-Tex, or your waterproof material, and it'll help kind of revive it and keep the beading going on the old jackets and coats and bibs and whatever else. It is. It's pretty magical stuff. So shout out to Nick Wax. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Let's just jump right into it. Josh, what's your favorite steelhead rod?
Right now?
Yep.
10-6 float rod.
GSP.
Probably a GSP. I haven't fished the X rods enough to say that's the one, but I've been really impressed with the GSP, especially because it probably speaks to more of the audience, like the price point and overall quality.
And as everyone knows, we're sponsored by Okuma. We love Okuma. They're one of our partners. They make great rods. So we'll talk a little bit about Okuma and kind of which ones we like out there, but more than anything, just kind of pay attention to the sizes and the actions and the lengths and everything that we're talking about, because you don't have to buy the brand that we fish. It's just something we like. So use whatever you got or whatever you want to use, but let's talk actions. For me, I definitely, for the longest time, I preferred a way longer float rod. If I could find the right rod, I would fish an 11-foot, 11.3, 11.2, somewhere in there. In most scenarios, in most rivers. Now, there's some rivers, if you're fishing super small creeks or things like that, you wouldn't want to have that long of a rod. That's what's interesting about the guys in the Midwest. And I'm sure some of you guys out there are listening to us, but a lot of these guys over there use these rods that are giant. 13, 14, 12 feet. I think that Lamoglass closer rod, what is that thing? It's 13 feet or something.
13, I think.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you think they use such huge rods in such small bodies of water?
Because they use 15-foot leaders in split shot.
It's
the only way they can cast. No, I'm just kidding.
90% of them are probably center pin fishermen too.
Exactly.
Right? So you're talking way more control over
any
that
kind
line.
of float fishing though. Still, I'm not the biggest fan of a 10.5-foot rod. I feel like it's a lot of times it's overkill, especially if you're, if you're bank fishing, it's a little edge.
Yeah.
But at the same rate, another 12 inches of reach. When you're already fishing a 9.5, almost 10-foot rod, I don't think does a whole lot for you. And I say it all the time. People ask well, should I get this rod or this rod, and spend all this money on a float rod? And honestly, you could probably float fish pretty effectively with a 10.5-foot stick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no sensitivity involved. It's more mending. It's fast action. It's a stiffer rod, and it's it's not as important to have a super high quality float rod in my opinion. It's just lighter.
I will say, though, and as you get more into float fishing, I think it does. I think it makes a huge difference. And the biggest thing, I think, is the casting. If you pick up a rod that's doesn't have the right action, and you try to cast a fixed float or a light float with a light jig, you're going to be struggling all day long. You're going to be annoyed. Whereas a lot of these 10-6 rods that are made for float fishing with these 6 to 12, 6 to 15, medium fast action rods, they're made to flick your wrist, and that freaking setup is going to go flying across the river as far as you want it to cast. So there is advantages in that, but at the same time, just like Jordan said, my first 2 years of steelhead fishing, or a year and a half, I was using a 9-foot a 9-foot rod. I don't even remember the brand name. It's just whatever I had laying around the house. And I caught a lot of fish doing it, but as I got more and more into float fishing and wanting to master it, you just realize how much nicer it is having a more quality rod. It's even when you're fishing all day, just having it be lighter.
That's what I was going to say.
When you're sitting there mending all day, and a lot of times when I'm float fishing, I hold my rod up over my head a lot to keep my line off the water, and so having a higher quality rod is important. I think if you're gonna really get into it, I think it makes a huge difference. But you like that 9.9, and that's what Cam likes too.
Mm-hmm.
So the Okuma makes a
probably the
9
most
foot
versatile.
9. And not a sales pitch, but I'd probably at this point I'd probably fish Okuma even if I wasn't sponsored by him.
Yeah, I really like him.
The price point and everything, and then the abuse that I've put on a lot of my guide selects, you know, and they haven't broken and they don't break easily, and I do things all the time to them that where they should break, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of a 10-6, and it's more so just because of, you know, it's just another foot of something to deal with in the trees or blah blah blah. You know, there's a lot of different reasons, but
it's definitely I've definitely found over the years it's a preference thing.
My favorite one so far is the 910 X rod. That's a pretty sweet rod.
Yeah,
it really is.
I love that. That's the one. Do you have that one, Josh?
I don't think I do have that one.
That's the one you need to get.
Might have that one. I'm not sure.
That's the one you need to get and fish or use, because that 910X float rod is by far
very similar to something else you used to really love. Yeah.
The 910 Lamaglass XMG is the rod that's modeled off, same action, and I absolutely loved that Lamaglass XMG rod. And Josh Cooper, who used to work at Lamaglass, designed that original 910 XMG, and the thing, just the action of it and the balance of it, and he was able to mimic it almost to a T in this X rod. Super light, super well balanced if you put a 2500 to 3000 reel on it, and it's just really fast action. So when you lift that thing up, I mean, you can see your line just right off the water, super quick to the hook set. It's a great rod. It's expensive, and I will say, like, they're not near as durable as a Guide Select Pro, in my opinion. Like, I've beat them up. I've definitely put some abuse.
But they're a much different rod.
Yeah, I've put some abuse on my X rod, so they will handle abuse. But they're not. Those Guide Selects are like workhorses. Those things you can do.
Yeah, they're not indestructible, but they are like literally workhorses. Yeah, you're like beating the brush kind of rod. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not worried about it.
The cool thing on the Okuma stuff out here is, you know, a lot of places you can just walk right. Most, you know, the X rod, the Guide Select Pros, they all have lifetime warranties, so you can just walk right into most stores in the Northwest and get a brand new rod if you break it. So if you're out here in the Northwest, that's an awesome selling point. If you're out in the Midwest and you don't have Okuma out there, you better start asking your local retailers to bring them in.
Or get on Okuma.com.
Yeah.
Okuma USA.
Okuma USA. Yeah.
No.
Well, let's talk a little more action. So you were talking, you don't really like the 10-foot-6, and I think maybe the difference is between that kind of from where I come from and you come from is you grew up kind of like fishing out of a raft a lot, being in a boat, where I grew up like fishing the bank and going to some of these huge rivers where you need 10-6, 11-6. You need a lot more rod to be able to float fish effectively.
You know, why I say something like that is I would take a 9.9 or a 9-foot rod and the right line over a 10-6 with the wrong kind of line, or old braid or something like that. You know what I mean? That's why I say that, because you can still make your money. You can still properly fish certain drifts and get your stuff in the water with a little bit shorter rod. As long as it's paired with the other right components. You know what I mean? Yeah. But
so what I pictured needing a longer rod for is, like, I can like vividly remember holes like in my head. But say you walk up to a hole and, you know, it's a medium-sized river, not necessarily a huge river. But what happens a lot of times is you may have like slow water right in front of you, and then in the middle of the river you're going to have some current, and then on the other side of the bank you're going to have more slow water. And a lot of times what you're wanting to do is get your float into that slow seam on the other side of the fast water. And if you don't have the right length rod to do that, you are not fishing that effectively ever, because you can't keep your line off of that current. So, but again, the only scenario, I mean, bank fishermen is where they're going to super excel at that. And then if you're fishing bigger rivers, you know, if you're on little, tiny, small rivers all day, like, you know, we have a couple local creeks, and I never take a 10-6 rod. I always take
it's too much. You're in the trees. You're constantly hitting stuff.
Can't even set the hook good.
It's hard to walk through the brush with it or anything, you know.
I've noticed when we're in your raft, I mean, it's almost like a nuisance to have a 10-6. Because it's too much. Yeah. Like that 9.9, if you were going to buy one rod to steelhead fish, the 9.9 would probably be the one. Yeah. Because you can still fish off the bank effectively, and then you can jump in the raft with a buddy and fish effectively.
Okay, so what about reels? Let's talk a little bit about size of reels.
Well, before we do that, let's talk about like your other favorite rod. Like,
well, I was going to go to other techniques. Like, we'll talk. So we're kind of talking a little float fishing rods right now. So let's just talk really quick, like reels. When you're pairing a reel with your float fishing, I like a 25 to 3,000. That's like the size that I like. I know, Jordan, sometimes you like to fish a little bigger.
I like it 4,000.
Jordan does for sure. I'm in the same ballpark as well.
I'll take a couple more ounces of weight on the reel to have that much more line.
Yeah.
You know, been spooled multiple times and always wished I had a little more line, you know. And I know Stephen Cameron went over to the C40s on a lot of his stuff, but, you know, there's even times where I'm always scared of running out of line on certain fish.
Well, a lot of times, too, you're using your rods for salmon and steelhead,
mm-hmm.
you know, and that's one part of the reason, like, I'm not guiding, so I don't have to have 4 or 5 setups like you do, 6 setups, whatever you got to have. So a lot of times I like to have, like, my specific, like, this is my steelhead float rod, this is my salmon float rod. So that's why I like a lighter setup. And honestly, with the way braid is nowadays, you know, you're fishing these 8 carrier braids that, you know, you're fishing a 30-pound, 40-pound test, which is the diameter of like an 8 or 10-pound marlin. You could put 300 yards of line on your freaking reel if you wanted to.
Right.
If you're getting spooled to 300 yards, you need to tighten your drag.
Yeah.
Or something. Like,
for me, it's always been a balance issue, and it kind of goes back to like what you're talking about with the lighter rod. Like, I have really bad carpal tunnel, so for me, it's like to have a lighter rod. It's like that a couple ounces that you're like, meh. If I have to hold my hand in the air all day, my hands go completely numb, and when it's cold out, it's miserable.
And they're numb already.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, so I tried to I think I jumped up to a 35 because I was fishing the Okuma RTXs, and I jumped up to a 35 versus a 30 because Jordan was fishing them, and I was instantly like, I don't like this. It's too big. Like, it just felt heavy to me.
Right.
It felt heavy and big. It felt unneeded, like unnecessary for a steelhead. But yeah, again, it's preference. That's why I want to talk about it, because it's cool. You know, everyone out there likes different sizes. And I think, so most of the companies out there, they either have they either do it in like 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, 45, like in those numbers, or they do it in like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 2,500, 3,500. So those are the sizes. Usually you can just stick with that first number, like just go to like 1 to 3. So basically, if you're out there and you're trying to get started, or you want to buy a new rod and reel setup for float fishing, I would definitely go with like a 2,500 up to like a 3,500, 4,000 range. But you don't want to go any bigger than that, and you probably don't want to go any smaller than that for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Now let's talk a little bit about other rods that we like. So what about when you're like casting spinners and hardware and spoons and stuff like that? What do you prefer, like lengthwise and all that?
Am I going first?
You can go first. You're the spinner man.
You know, I really do like, you know, the Baitcaster X rod, the 9.9. I thought 9.9 would be a little bit too long. Normally, I wouldn't use like a 9.9 rod for throwing spinners or anything like that. But I have noticed with that longer rod and the design of that rod, the weight and like the way it's built, you can cast a lot better.
Your precision,
especially especially with the bait casting reels, which it can be pretty tough for people at times. Paired with that Helios, it's ridiculous how accurate and how easy you can flip and cast. Where normally you'd think you'd need a shorter rod for that. In the past, I was thinking about it while we were having this conversation. I was like, man, when's the last time you heard somebody say 8.6? But I can honestly say we probably all caught our first steelhead on an 8.6 rod.
Yeah, that was
you know what I mean.
That was like the staple steelhead.
Yeah, I was like,
but that's because a lot of guys back then, and us included, drift fished.
Right.
And like everyone drift fished.
Well, it was
like
more of what was available too.
Yeah.
At the same time,
it wasn't all those longer lengths.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But no, I like at least over 9 foot these days. Really. You know, 9 foot to that 9.9, and it's funny I say I didn't think I'd like the 9.9, but it's more because that's what most of the GSP bobber rods are. They're all 9.9, and it steps right up to the 10.6. And I wouldn't fish those rods fishing a spinner or anything like that because you don't have that sensitivity. But in certain rods, especially a bait casting rod, you have that sensitivity, and you know it's a unique rod. But that, and then the 9.3, the 9.3X, and the spinning as well as. Or I think the GSP is 9.2, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the 9.2 and that is like, I mean, it's one of the best spinner rods that I've ever really fished. You know, there's been a lot of different ones on the market. And
so and both of you answer this, would you rather fish a casting rod or a spinning rod for when it comes to hardware?
I like spinning.
Yeah.
Because that's for my personal preference.
More versatile.
I'm more accurate too with a spinning rod. But I have picked up that 9.9 and casted around with it, and it's pretty good. But I just feel more comfortable throwing spinners.
Yeah.
But you can't extend your drift like you probably can with a bait caster.
Right.
Like you can't extend that spinner back in the low.
I mean, technically you can. You just dump some line out, use your finger or whatever. But honestly, I think a lot of the I keep pushing. I'm not trying to sell you guys things here, but that 9.9 or that 9.3 bait caster setup with the right reel, it's like made me a more accurate and better caster with a bait caster. Like I didn't, me and Cam went and hiked up some small creeks this last weekend, and like he never said anything, but I knew he was impressed because I was impressed with myself. Like he's like, oh, there's a fish right there, a little further. Like I was hitting spots that I was aiming for, but I was putting it within like inches of that spot, and I don't think I could have done that with a lesser rod or a differently designed rod. Just being able, having everything going, meshing together. I don't think I could have hit those spots to a T like that with a spinning rod. Because you'd have to stop it, and then you get that spring back, and you'd be hitting. You wouldn't be casting the same as you would with that bait caster. But normally, I would say bait caster because you can do the skip cast, you can do different styles of casting that like get you into weird spots. But then we're kind of going off on a different tangent there. But I'd say spinning. It's just more versatile.
I think so.
Yeah,
I like spinning, and I like that 9 foot 8 to 17. Ever since we went to Alaska, that has been like. From steelhead to coho to salmon,
right?
Like, I love that spinning rod.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the consensus that I've seen with most hardware rods. If you guys are going out to the store and you're looking for a hardware rod, look for something that's like over faster. 9 foot in that 8 to 17 pound action. That's going to be like your prime hardware rod. And I'm the same way. Like I fish spoons a lot with hardware, so I much prefer a casting setup. I don't fish as many spinners. I need to get into fishing more of those, but yeah, I prefer a casting setup just because of the versatility of what you're able to do with a casting setup. But it's definitely more of an advanced method. It's something you want to get into.
Well, we could probably all attest too at the same rate if we're talking that same rod. A bait caster if we're going to be drift fishing. It's the same as kind of hardware. Yep. I'd probably prefer a bait caster for drift fishing any day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
a lot of guys do it with spinning, though. And
everybody, especially all the side drifters out there, all the people that fish those big rivers and everything, they're all using spinning, and it kind of shocks me sometimes. But you can't spend half your day trying to teach somebody how to use a
spinning rod. Would feel weird to me drift fishing for sure.
Well, then you go to some places and they're using freaking the monofilament and the spinning, which is really weird thing.
Yeah,
you can't feel anything. You just wait for the fish to start swimming away.
Yeah, that's true. Right. That's true. All right. Well, what other rods we use for steelhead here? What's another one you want to talk about? Like, what's another action?
I don't drift fish enough to speak on that. Like, maybe Jordan drift fishes more than I do.
I mean, not really. If we get free time to go fish, usually we're either filming or we're guiding. So it's like, am I going to really sit here and rig up my drift fishing rod constantly while somebody's already putting a float through there?
Well, honestly, that anything that's in that 9 to 3, 6 to 15.
It's a very versatile rod.
Over 9 foot in like a 6 to 15 range is what I would look for if I was a drift fishing setup. Again, it's good to have a little bit more length, hold your line off the water, control your.
Well, no beginner fisherman's going to be going out and buying 2 rods. We can probably confidently say that a lot of time. And I would say if you're just getting into it.
When I was a beginner, I bought like 20 rods.
Right. Even you accumulate this stuff,
You definitely accumulate this stuff.
But I would say, like, if you want a rod where you can cut your line and put a bobber on and fish it, and then, cut your line and put a spinner on and do whatever, and then try to drift fish, getting into that 9.3 range, that GSP 9.3 or any of the other models, Lambda Glass or Loomis or anything like that, getting that over 9 foot rod will allow you to be, effectively fish all kinds of different methods and not be missing out. You know what I mean? I'd rather have a little shorter rod and be able to bobber fish than go with too long of a rod and be completely, complacent trying to gear fish or hardware fish, So.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about float rods. We talked a little bit about spinner kind of hardware spoon rods. Let's talk a little bit about. Well, also we talked about reels. We didn't touch much on bait casting reels, but it's kind of the same thing. Anything into that, like a 273. I just don't know the numbers on casting reels, but you're gonna want something to medium to small size. You don't want a big ass bait caster on there. You don't need a line counter. You don't need any of that kind of stuff. So just a nice, good, low pro bait caster, and there's a million different brands out there. We fish the Helios. But, a lot of people like the Corrados, Abu Garcia reels. There's some...
Spending a little bit more. I mean, I feel like you can get away with a little bit cheaper reel if you're just the weekend fisherman when we're talking about a spinning reel. But, when you got two different reels sitting next to each other, one's $15 or $20 more. I think that extra $15, that extra couple bearings. Spending a little bit extra money on those, I feel
usually
like
has more adjustments.
Yeah. I feel like that's a little more important.
Well, especially with casting, because if you can get those extra adjustments and stuff, it's going to help you cast a lot better with a casting reel. So, yeah, definitely spending a little bit more. I think those Helios reels that Okuma makes are in like a
150 to 200.
Yeah, I think they're like 150. And those are nice. They have like an internal brake system, and they cast really well. But same with Abu Garcia. I know they have, like, I fished back in the day when I first started fishing. I used that Black Max. Like, it was such
it worked fine though.
Cheap reel, and it worked fine. So just whatever you guys can get out there for sure. But let's talk a little bit about line. So what about line? Let's start on like a hardware setup first. Like, what do you like to fish for hardware line? What are you typically putting on your
setup? I like to go as small as possible, and I would never. It depends on where you're fishing, but I would never, I think, make the move to like a 20 or a 25 pound braid. I just stick with a 30 and try to go. I always like to use high vis no matter what. My biggest pet peeve is a dark colored line when I'm trying to spinner fish and like pinpoint.
And you like braid, right? Let's back up and make sure.
Yep, always braid in all rounds.
So like a high vis 30-pound braid.
Yeah, high vis all day long, and because especially with the hardware rod or like a drift fishing rod, because I'm always tying a bumper on. That's a big part of it. In those rods, I want to be able to see where my line is. I want to be able to in low light or whatever, I want to be able to see where the end of my line is and where I'm working that spinner through or that drift fishing.
That is the worst, having dark
line.
I
hate it when you get somebody and you have a super dark or black line almost, and you're just fishing blind half the time, and it definitely hinders your accuracy in your fishing. But I like to stick with a 30-pound when we're talking any kind of hardware because it actually sinks through the water.
Yeah, kind of lower diameter of the line. It cuts through that water column a lot nicer.
Yeah, and try to stay away from those floating lines. A lot of them are floating, but those Teflon lines or a coated line of any sort.
Dude, the tough line Dominate. It's a great one to start with. Doesn't have any sort of external floating coating on it. Cuts through the water well.
Right.
I've used Tough Line forever. They have that Tough Line Force too, which is like a 4-carrier braid. Same thing, a little bit stronger.
Yep.
Yeah,
and it holds up well. I think it's important to, especially with that braid on a hardware rod, because you're constantly moving that line back and forth through your tip. It wears it out.
And I think sensitivity too, running braid.
Exactly.
That's the other thing with braid. Just like what Josh just said, your sensitivity it's so much higher.
Yeah.
When you have braid, you feel every little tick on every rock.
Yeah.
It's really hard to feel that.
I just feel naked out there if I
straight mono.
Touch a rod that doesn't have braid on it now.
Anymore, it's weird. Yeah. Anymore, it definitely is weird to pick up a rod with just mono on it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about that for hardware. What about on a float setup? So I can start this one off. Over the last few years I used to fish 14-pound braid, then I jumped it up to 20, then I jumped it up to 30, and now this year I just rigged all my stuff with 50.
Yeah.
I put 50-pound braid, and here's why, because the more I've increased it, the more I can tell how much better that line floats.
It's got more surface area.
It's got more surface, a little bit more diameter, and when you pick that line up, it just floats off the water perfectly, and it's so much nicer for mending, so much nicer for controlling your float and controlling your setup. So, again, I don't have enough experience underneath of it. I've only had it on for a little bit. Last year I used 40-pound, and I loved it, but I thought, man, if I'm using 40, why not go to 50?
Yeah.
It's not hurting you in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion.
No, it's not visual. They're not seeing it.
No.
I'm still stuck in the 30-pound realm, but I have thought about moving up to 40 because I know you guys used it a lot last year and liked it.
Yeah. There's so many benefits to it. You get less tip wraps, less wind knots, higher diameter. It just has less. It doesn't do any of that stuff.
That's definitely why.
One thing I will touch on, and I'm right there with you. 50, maybe 60-pound test at times. It's just the floating ability of it and being able to mend, and it doesn't get sucked down in those little currents and those boils. But one thing I will say about it, and I'm gonna call Marlin. I haven't seen you do this lately. You've just been running that straight 50 braid to your swivels. With that heavy line, I feel like it is super imperative to use a bumper and add that bumper to it, because again, the general scheme of it is that you want your line to float. And if you're trying to count on that line sinking through your bobber and going down to the bottom, you're not calculating that when you're fishing. You're not thinking about how you're getting all that line drag.
Inline floats?
Exactly. Well, yeah, just inline.
He's talking about like a slide float.
Like a slip
float. Yeah, like a bobber dog setup.
He puts a bumper on it, which
a lot of guys do
religiously. And a lot of guys do, but also
a
lot of guys might not be fishing those 50-pound tests and stuff. And I don't know. Maybe I just don't.
I can watch. If you're fishing a river where you have to get down fast, and there's a scenario where you have to like get down super fast, and I could see why you would do that. But like, I can watch my line sliding through the float, and I can know when it hits bottom. Yeah. Like I know when it bottoms out and it hits its thing, and I just don't want to tie a bumper on. The reason I'm fishing a sliding float so I don't have to have a bumper.
Right.
Like it's like a whole extra step that I don't want to do, and then I'm limiting myself to my depth unless I do a giant bumper.
Yeah.
There's guys that...
I always just calculate and like think about the river or the run I'm going to, and I just try to think about what's the deepest run I think I'm going to encounter. And I'll pull that much bumper off, and eventually it gets a little bit shorter, and you got to add a new one. But I don't know. I just feel like but again, though, you can tell it's getting down. But think about the speed, and think about the line drag, and so on and so forth. And think about when you put a spinner on 50-pound test and cast it. Or a twitching jig, even a half, 3/4 ounce twitching jig, and you fish it, and you're like, man, this is just not right. It's not getting down there, and I'm not getting the same presentation. And I've just noticed it over years, and by fishing like super high velocity rivers and rapids and different kinds of water, I really think there's times that I've not used a bumper and definitely seen the difference. And it's different if you're from the bank as well. I feel like too, if you're fishing from a boat and you're side drifting with your gear, and you're not relying on your stuff getting down and going away from you as much, not having that bumper I don't think hinders you as much. But if you're on the bank and you're a strict bank fisherman, I think having that bumper on the end of that heavy line in particular is really important. So, but that's just my little opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just never done it. I don't, I've never really focused on putting a bumper on a sliding float. But I also, like, over the years have not, like, I predominantly fish fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, any chance I get to fish a fixed float, I'm fishing a fixed float.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense. I never thought much about it, like, as the drag. If you're fishing a freaking 15-foot, 10-foot hole and you have all that braid sitting there vertical in the water.
That makes sense.
The braid's going to drag.
I mean, there'll be some currents, too, that would probably even pull your float down with that much drag.
Yeah, or it might not even sink. I've just seen it. I've watched from a distance and watched clients fishing a tail out and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of times when you think you're fishing that you're just really not. You're not getting down and you're not effectively getting in the zone, which is the most important part.
So you're running like 50-pound braid to like a 30-pound bumper braid?
No, like mono? 15. I'll go like a 15-pound fluoro or a 20-pound fluoro.
That's why I was wondering if it was going to
and it slides
another
to the
braid
float nicer. I mean, there's all
mono.
kinds of reasons why I like it more, but
So I think it would be effective too, just to run it straight to like another mono bumper almost. I mean, a braid bumper.
Oh, just a smaller braid.
Mm-hmm. You could do that too. That we don't have to worry. I don't know. Never tried.
I have to play around with that.
I know guys that do like.
That's annoying though, because that adds another step that I have to do.
I know guys that do that for like real leery Chinook. Like they'll tie into the braid to keep the braid out of the vision of the float. The bait. Yeah, and that makes sense too. Like I've never thought about that. It's never crossed my mind. I've always just. My thought's always been steelhead are so dumb they're gonna bite it anyway. Yeah, I've always just ran it directly to my braid, but. That's a good little segue to stop on, I think. And we appreciate all you guys tuning in. We talked rods, reels, line, all that stuff. Make sure you guys drop some comments. Let us know what subjects you want us to keep talking about. We'll probably continue to talk more steelhead throughout the rest of, the spring until we really get into some salmon fishing stuff later in early March or so. So thanks again for tuning in. We appreciate it. Don't forget, leave us a review. Check us out on our other platforms, YouTube, Facebook, all those fun things. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you guys on the river. See you guys later.